We're talking water now and next week and next month. We deliberately waited to start our series until fire season started because it's a topic that's on the tip of many tongues right now. So what's ahead for New Mexicans when it comes to the hot, dry existence we've carved out for ourselves here in the desert Southwest? We begin with the author of the book, A Great Aridness, William Dubuis. Here's NMIF producer Matt Grubbs.
Well, Bill, the situation seems pretty dire. If you pick up the first, as I mentioned when we were talking earlier, 50 pages of that book, things don't look so good in the Southwest.
Well, I wish they were better. I wish I had written a happier story. I never intended to be a kind of Jeremiah talking about the sky falling or whatever, but things are very serious, and they're getting more serious. Since I wrote the book, I guess I finished writing 2 or 3 years ago. It takes a while for a book to get manufactured and come out. Nothing that's happened has contradicted any of the conclusions that I reached in the book, and the data as it comes from the scientific community, or the conclusions, the analyses, are, if anything, bleaker now than they were a few years ago.
Why is it so hard for us to pay attention to this sort of thing?
Boy, that's the jackpot question, and I don't really have the answer to it. Some people say that people are just not cognitively equipped to deal with slow-moving threats, that you know, the nasty-looking guy coming over the hill with a club in his hand, we can respond to that because our adrenal glands get us, you know, arouse us and prepare us to deal with imminent threat. Slow kinds of things like climate change are very difficult for us. That's one reason. Another reason is that the vested economic interests, big oil and big coal, really don't want us to look this problem in the eye and don't want us to take it on. When there was a rather weak cap-and-trade bill before Congress in, I think, 2010, big oil and big coal spent about $500 million lobbying against even that. But if you pile up all the reasons not to do something, they all come down sort of to what John Kenneth Galbraith said once upon a time, which was that faced with the necessity of changing one's mind or proving that it is unnecessary, nearly everybody gets busy on the proof. But the fact is that although we've known about this problem in some detail since at least the 1980s, we've done really nothing about it. And so now we've got ourselves painted into a rather tight corner, and our opportunities for decisive action, action that really would remedy the situation or improve the situation materially, our options are getting fewer and fewer. Our decision space, if you will, is narrower and narrower.
We're running out of time, or it's happening faster than we thought.
You know, the models that predict how climate change is going to move have proved to be very robust. Their predictions are holding up extremely well, except in one major respect, and that is that the changes are happening faster than the models predicted.
You said in your book, A Great Aridness, that human beings, you know, if something's going to happen, we have this knack for making it happen a lot sooner.
Our impact on the environment is in many instances not determinative, but more synergistic. We cause things to happen more quickly or with greater force than might otherwise be the case.
That is something that perhaps comes closest to representing the guy coming over the hill with the club, are the intensity of what's happening. We looked just recently to the storm in Oklahoma. We looked to the Sandy hurricane on the East Coast. I mean, just about every area has something to point to say, wow, that didn't seem to used to happen so much.
Yeah, there are lots of big storms and droughts and so forth that have happened in recent years that if they weren't caused by climate change in their magnitude or in their severity, they at least fit the pattern of what we expect from the models of climate change. So for a long time, scientists were very, very careful about what they could say. They would say that maybe climate change didn't cause this, but it fits our expectations of what climate change will do. There's an increasing sort of sub-area of activity in climate change science right now, which are called attribution studies, which actually make the causal link between this drought and climate change. And an example is the severe drought in Texas and Oklahoma in 2011. It was so severe that it actually doesn't fit any of the models for the natural range of variability for those areas, and it appears to be not the drought itself is not the result of climate change, because droughts are natural to that region, but the severity can be attributed to climate change because the severity was so much greater than anything we can explain otherwise.
The way in particular that the Southwest demonstrates climate change, what grabbed you about that for the book?
Well, I got started on the book when I was sitting in a hotel room at a conference in Albuquerque, and I saw a man, a climate scientist, put a map up on the screen that was a map of predicted changes in water availability, basically. And the Southwest, my beloved Southwest, my homeland, was bright red. It was, in this prediction, one of the big losers on water. And I thought, I want to get to the bottom of that map. I want to talk to the man who made it. I want to talk to the people behind the science that produced that map. And I did, and the stories behind that are in the book that I wrote, A Great Aridness. The Southwest, already hot and dry, is going to get a lot hotter and a lot drier. As Jonathan Overpeck of the University of Arizona says, there are going to be winners and losers in climate change, and the Southwest is going to be a loser.
What does that mean for our daily life, 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road, this summer?
Well, I'm not all that good at looking into crystal balls, I don't think, but I do believe that the Southwest is going to have to shrink in some ways, and certainly the agricultural sector is going to shrink a good deal. Ranching, farming, without water, we're not going to be able to ranch and farm as much as we do now. I think in the years ahead, we're going to see a lot of transfers of water or lease arrangements of water from agriculture, which still controls most of the water in New Mexico and Arizona and our neighboring states. There's going to be a lot of movement of water from agriculture to municipal and industrial uses. And that's going to mean that the ag sector is going to shrink. It may mean that the ag landowners, who tend to be the ag water right owners, may not suffer. They'll be compensated for those transfers. But all the rest of the sector, the truck drivers and the farm hands and the fertilizer salesman and the guy who sells the trucks and the schools that are supported by taxes that come out of agricultural areas and so forth. These places are all going to be pretty hard hit. The impacts on the cities, I think, are much, much harder to forecast, because cities are so much more flexible and so much more, in a way, complex. So I don't really know, but I think that a place like Phoenix, for instance, which is already a very hot place, as it gets hotter and hotter, you just wonder, where's the limit? How hot can it get before it becomes virtually unlivable? It is already unlivable without electricity. And so power is going to be the key. Air conditioning is going to be the key for many of our desert cities. And there's a tight link between power generation and water. It takes a lot of water to generate power, whether it's a coal-fired plant or a hydro plant or a nuclear plant. And so as long as we remain in the kind of generation system that we're in today, that power is going to make big demands on our water supplies, which will be dwindling and under big demand from other sectors for other uses at the same time. So how that works out is anybody's guess, but it's going to be the game of the century.
What about smaller players in the upper basin, New Mexico in particular? You look at the growth of Albuquerque on the west side, Rio Rancho, Las Cruces. You think of the fast-growing cities here, they are in dry spots. And yet, the housing industry, everything that goes along with that, the construction of roads and all that infrastructure, that's what we think of as growth. Yes. And a positive economic driver. Are we thinking about that the wrong way?
Well, ultimately, we have to find a way to support an economy that isn't based on continuous growth. There's no two ways about it. We've got to find a way to achieve a kind of steady state economy. We're a long way from that right now. But we don't have the water to keep growing infinitely.
And as you dig into the book, you see that drought is likely going to come more frequently, and it's going to be deeper, and we're going to get a new normal. So the importance of that resiliency is really underscored by what you found.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, in a sense, maybe we're not in a drought right now. Maybe this is the new normal. That's what some of the modeling indicates, that the new normal for the Southwest is going to be what the drought of the 1950s or the 1930s was. But for instance, we don't say that the Sahara Desert is experiencing drought. Drought is something exceptional. The Sahara is dry by nature. What we're dealing with here today is probably the beginning of an era where the dryness, the aridity, the intensified aridity we're experiencing is not really a drought. It is the new normal.
And yet still, when I think back to the 2012 election, it is almost taboo, at least among the Republican Party, to acknowledge the impact of humans on the climate and to say that we cause that sort of thing. Is there a gap between that opinion and the science that is out there?
Well, this is one of the great tragedies of the United States and really of the globe today, that in so many areas, and particularly in America, in our politics, climate change has become a kind of ideological football that gets passed back and forth. And people have attached themselves so much to their positions that they have lost sight of their interests. And the denial of climate change in our political sphere by so many so many members of Congress, so many influential people, is going to bring the country to great woe. There's no two ways about it. And one way of thinking of it is that climate change is the most grievous intergenerational crime in the history of humankind. The people who are the biggest losers in this are not people my age, not people your age, but the people the age of our children and our grandchildren. They are going to inherit an earth that is much less supportive, much less livable than the beautiful planet we have been enjoying.
Do you see reason for hope? Do you see optimism in, if not the way the climate is changing, the way that we're handling it?
Well, always. I mean, we could get down to business and make some real changes. I'll just mention one more tragedy of climate change, and that is technologically, we have the means to shift our economy. We can move away from fossil fuels. We can do that without depressing the economy, because we'll be growing in so many areas as we kind of shrink other areas. We can do this stuff. Part of the tragedy is that we can do it, but we aren't doing it. But we can still get started. and we need to get started. And there's always so much great work to be done. I mean, I get up every morning and I look out the window and think, what a beautiful land this is. What a beautiful place this is. And as long as there's that beauty out there, for me, there's something to work on. There's something to defend. There's something to try to protect, something to try to hold on to. And so that kind of effort, at least for me, gives meaning, and as long as there's meaning, I think those things are inherently optimistic. There's always something good that we can achieve right now and tomorrow.